Masechet Horayot Daf Yod Bet. Today we're going to talk about rules of precedence. Kol hatadir mechavero kodem et chavero. Any mitzvah that's more frequent comes first. If you have two korbanot and one is more frequent and one less, then you do the more frequent one first. Same with other mitzvot. Anything that's holier than something else, the holier one goes first. Par HaMashiach u'par ha'eda omdim. Par HaMashiach kodem lepar ha'eda bechol ma'asav. The third rule is that if you have the par hatat of the Kohen Gadol and also a par that the judges bring, and we have to bring both of them on the same day, then the par of the Kohen Gadol goes first for all its actions, meaning for all the sacrificial rites, all parts of the process. You do the par HaMashiach first. The Gemara asks, Mina hane mileh. How do you know the first rule that whatever is more frequent goes first? Amar Abayed Amar Kera Milebad Olat HaBoker Asher LeOlat HaTamid. This is in Bemidbar Parashan Pinchas regarding the korbanot that one brings on Pesach. So it says you bring the special musafim that you bring on Pesach, and that's besides the olah that you do in the morning, which is the daily olah. Lamali, mikedi ketib olat haboker olat tamid lamali. This is redundant. Why do you have to tell me that it's olat haboker if you already said it's olat tamid? We know olat tamid. There's one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So why do you need to say both phrases? Hachikama kol de tedira kadma. It's telling me that because it's olat hatamid, because it's given every day. Well, there's nothing more frequent than every day. Therefore, olat haboker, it goes first. The first korban you're going to bring in the morning is going to be the korban tamid shel shachar, and only then you bring all the other korbanot that are for the holiday, and because the holidays do not come as often as every day. The next rule in the Mishnah is anything that's holier than something else comes first. Minelan. Tetana deber b'Yishmael ve'qiddashto lechol davar shebekedusha liftoch rishon u'barech rishon ve'yitol mana yafeh rishon. We know this from a baraita from the school of Yishmael that says regarding a kohen, you shall sanctify him. So a kohen, he is sanctified already. What do you mean that you will sanctify him? It means that we're going to treat a kohen in a special way. So for all matters that are kadosh, we allow that to go first. For example, a kohen is going to read the Torah first, gets the first aliyah. He's going to say Birkat HaMazon first. He's going to lead the zimun. And if you're divvying something up, some food, then you give the kohen first. Par kohen mashuach upar ha'eda. The next rule in the Mishnah is if you have the par of the Kohen Gadol and that of the judges, the Kohen Gadol goes first. What's the source for this? In the paragraph regarding the par that the judges bring, it says at the end of that paragraph that you will burn it like you burnt the first one. The first one means the one that was referring to the previous par earlier in the chapter, that of Kohen Gadol. Matamud lomar harishon. Why is it called the par of the Kohen Gadol harishon? I mean, the simple reason is because it was mentioned beforehand. But why call it Rishon? Sheyeh Rishon kodem lepar ha'eda bechol ma'asav. To teach me that the par of the Kohen Gadol goes first before the par of the judges regarding all the actions, the slaughter, the preparation, the burning, everything. Tenor banan, par kohen mashiach upar ha'eda omdim, par kohen mashiach kodem lepar ha'eda bechol ma'asav ho'il, u'mashim mechaper ve'eda mitkaperet. Dinu sheyakdim mechaper lamitkaper, v'chen omer v'chiper ba'ado ba'ad beto u'ba'ad kol kahal Yisrael. A Braita expands on the Mishnah and gives an additional reason and says that the part of the Kohen Gadol goes first before that of the judges. You have both of them there, so the one of the Kohen Gadol goes before the one of the judges. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol brings atonement to everyone, and the judges, they need atonement. So it makes sense that the Kohen Gadol's pod which brings atonement to others, should come first before those who need atonement. Right? This is we're talking about on Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol says then regarding Yom Kippur that the Kohen Gadol will atone for himself and for his household, and only after that he atones for all of Israel. And since he is the leader in bringing atonement on Yom Kippur for everyone, including the judges, it makes sense that he should go first. Pad ha'alem davar shel sibur kodem lepad shel avodah zara. And now the Baraita continues with other things that questions of what takes precedence. The par elim davar shel sibur that the judges bring for all mitzvot, all mitzvot that fit into the definition, that it would be karet and chatat, and they bring a par. That comes before kodem lepar, comes before the par that the court would bring if they do avodah zarah. If a court issues a mistaken ruling about avodah zarah that people follow, then they have to bring a pad and a sa'ir. So the pad for other mitzvot comes first before the pad that they have to bring for avodah zarah, if they have to bring both on the same day. Mai ta'ama, why? Hai chatat v'hai olah v'tanya v'kiri b'tasher lechatat rishona. Because the pad is a korban chatat, and the pad helim davar shel sibur is a chatat. The one that you bring for avodah zarah is an olah. And we're in the paragraph regarding a korban olev yored, the middle level, if someone is not so wealthy but not so poor, he brings 2 birds. And if you bring 2 birds, one is a chatat and one is an olah. And the pasuk there says that you should bring the bird for a chatat first. Now, why does the pasuk need to say that? Why need to say that? If it's to teach that you sacrifice the korban chatat bird first, I would already know that from a later pasuk that says the second one you make an olah, as is the law, kamishpat. אלא זה בנאיו שהוא כל החטאות קודמות לעולות הבאים עמהם וכמלן דאפילו חטאת העוף קודמת לעולת בהמה. Rather, this paragraph regarding the 2 birds, it says it twice. It says that the chatat is first, and it also says the olah is second. I don't need to tell me that olah is first if I already know the olah is second. So it's giving this extra information to be a precedent, to be a paradigm for all other laws, that chatat always comes before a korban olah, if it comes together, if it's related to each other. And furthermore, even if the korban chatat was only a bird, and the korban olah is an animal, and you think, well, animal is more prestigious than a bird, it should come first. No, even in that case, the chatat will come first, and the olah comes after. So that's how I know that when the bet din has to bring 2 things, the pad as a chatat will come before the pad that they bring as an olah. Now, pad avodah zarah kodem l'sa'ir avodah zarah. Now, within avodah zarah, the court makes a mistake regarding avodah zarah, and they have to bring a pad and a sa'ir. The pad goes first. We ask, amai, hai chatat v'hai olah. That doesn't make sense, because the sa'ir is a chatat. So you just said that a chatat goes first. So really the sa'ir lechatat should go first, and then the pad for an olah after. Amri b'marava mishmed rava bar mari chatat avodah zarah chasera aleph lechatat keti. And so one answer, it says in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, in the name of Rava bar Mari, that the word chatat, when it comes to avodah zarah, is spelled chet tet taf. That's it, just without an aleph. Why is it missing an aleph? To say that this korban chatat is diminished. There's something a little bit lesser about it. What's lesser? That doesn't go first. You bring the pad, that's an olah for avodah zarah first. Rava amar kamishpat keti be. Rava says, no, I have a different answer. It says the word kamishpat means according to the law, or according to the sentence. And in this pasuk, it talks about the pad first and then the sa'ir. So therefore, since it says kamishpat, in this case, you follow the order exactly as it is, even though in general, a korban chatat would come before an olah. Sa'ir avodah zarah kodem l'sa'ir nasi. If the congregation does idolatry, they bring a sa'ir, and that comes before the sa'ir of a nasi. My ta'ama, what's the reason? Hay sibur v'hayachid, because the congregation is going to come before an individual. Although the Nasi is the king, and that he's an important individual, but he's not more important than the whole congregation, and therefore the Sayyid for Avodah Zarah for the whole congregation comes first. Sayyid Nasi kodem l'Seidat Yachid, my ta'ama hay melech v'hayajot. On the other hand, if the king acts in a mistaken way and does a sin, so he brings a sa'ir, that will come before the se'irah of a regular individual, a commoner who violates a transgression by mistake, brings a se'irah. The king will go first. Why? Because he's the king. And the other person is just a commoner. So the congregation is better than the king, but the king is better than any individual. Se'irat yachid kodemet lechibsat yachid. Now, an individual who makes a sin, a commoner, not a king, not Kohen Gadol, not a judge, he has a choice. He could bring a female goat or a female sheep. So if you have two people and they both sinned and they're both bringing korbanot chatat on the same day, the one who brings a se'irah comes before the one who brings a kivsa. Hold on. There's another braita that says the opposite, that the kibsa of an individual comes before the she goat. Amar Abaye Tana'ehi. It's actually a machloket between two Tanaim. Mor sabar se'ira adifa sheken nitrabeta esel avodah zara biyachid. Mor sabar kibsa adifa sheken nitrabeta be'alya. It's machloket Tanaim. One of them thinks that the se'ira is the more important of the two, because you use a se'ira for avodah zarah. If an individual does avodah zarah by mistake, he brings a se'irah, not a sheep. So you see, se'irah is more important, more effective. And the other says, no, a sheep is better because it has a fat tail. And that's a nice fat tail. It's a beautiful offering, and it's nicer than the she goat. And so we have both opinions. Omer kodem lakebes haba imo. On the second day of Pesach, we bring Korban HaOmer, which is some barley, and along with the barley, you also bring a lamb. Now, which one do you do first? The answer is the barley. Not that the barley is more important than an animal, but the main thing is the Omer. Then we bring an animal that comes alongside it. The animal in this case is the side dish. Because you have to bring the omer, we'll bring also an animal. But the main thing here is that from before that, you can't have any new grain. Now you can have new grain. We're celebrating, thanking Hashem for the barley that ripens at that time. And so the kebes is in service of the omer, and therefore the omer comes first. On Shavuot, we bring 2 loaves of wheat. And that comes along with kivasim. But the wheat offering comes first, because here also we're celebrating, thanking Hashem for the harvest of the wheat, and the kivasim are just a side point to come alongside. Zeh kilal. Davar haba begin layom, kodem ladavar haba begin lechem. The rule is that something that comes because that's the day, today is the day of the Omer, the second day, the 16th of Nisan. We have to bring the barley because of the day, so the day comes first. Or the bread, Ashan Shavuot. We bring it because of Shavuot, we're celebrating the wheat. So that has to come first because it comes for the day, before something that comes as an accompaniment to the bread. The sheep on these days is only an accompaniment to the meal offering. Next Mishnah, Ha'ish kodem la'isha la'chayot ul'hasheb abeda, va'isha kodemet la'ish lichsut ul'hosi mibet hashebi. A man precedes a woman when it comes to their life. If 2 people are drowning, a man and a woman, and you only have one life raft, then the man comes first. The reason is because he fulfills more mitzvot. Therefore, you can save someone who fulfills more mitzvot. Or, if they're in the desert and there's only one sandwich and only one of them can eat it, same thing. Or, to return a lost item, you return the lost item of the man before the woman. If you could do both, obviously, we love to do both. But we're talking about a difficult situation when you have to choose. However, the woman precedes a man if you only have one garment. And both a man and a woman need a garment, so it's more more shameful for a woman to be without clothing for a man, so it goes to the woman. Or two, if there's two hostages, a man and a woman, and there's only enough money to redeem one of them, we redeem the woman first because we are afraid that she will be sexually assaulted and the man will not. So therefore, it's worse for the woman to be in captivity. However, if the captives are such people that they would sexually abuse the woman and also the man, then the man takes precedence in going free, because that's considered by the Mishnah to be worse, that if the male captors will rape the men, that's considered worse than the woman. Tenor Rabbanan, hayahu v'aviv v'rabo b'shevi, hu kodem l'rabo v'rabo kodem l'Aviv, imo kodemet lechulam. A Braita will expand on further cases and say, if a person himself was taken into captivity along with his father and his teacher, then he can only redeem one person, then he redeems himself. A person takes care of himself first. Put your own mask on before anybody else. And then, if it's between his teacher and his father, then his teacher, because his teacher brings him spiritual life. His father only brought him biological life. And then the father. But if a mother is captive and himself, the mother takes precedence over everybody. Chacham kodem lemelech Yisrael. Chacham shemet en lanu kayoseh bo. Melech Yisrael shemet, kol Yisrael reuyim lemalchut. If a Torah sage and a king are both in need, they're in captive, or they both need to be saved, then the Torah scholar takes precedence over a king. Why? Because if a Torah scholar dies, then we have no one like him. To have one Torah scholar, you know what you have to put into that. These are very rare, so you can't. It's not easily replaceable. Whereas a king who dies, anybody could be a king, right? Just pick anyone. What does it take? No big deal. So Torah scholars are more precious than a king. Melech kodem lekohen gadol shenemar vayomer hamelech lahem kechui machem et abdei adonechem. A king takes precedence over a kohen gadol, and we see this because when King David wanted to coronate his son Shlomo, he spoke to Sadok the kohen gadol, and he said, "Listen, kohen gadol, take with you from the servants of your master." Your master means the king. So he's telling Sadok, I am your master. He's referring to himself as the master in front of Sadok. That means Sadok has to look up to the king. So therefore the king comes first. Kohen gadol kodem lenavi shenemaru mashach oto sham Sadok hakohen v'natan hanavi. And from the same context, we learned that the Kohen gadol takes precedence over a prophet, because there it says that Sadok will coronate the King Shlomo, and then Natan will do it. So Sadok comes first. Hikdim Sadok leNatan. V'omer Shema na Yoshua Kohen Gadol ata v'ra'echa. Another proof that Kohen Gadol comes first is from Yoshua, the Kohen Gadol. He was the Kohen Gadol in the beginning of the second Bet HaMikdash. And in Zechariah it says, here, Yoshua, you and your colleagues sit before you. They are men of mofet, men of signs. And behold, I will bring forth my servant. Semach is predicting a good thing to come. Now, who is he sitting with? Yachol Hejot Hayu is Yehoshua Kohen Gadol sitting with commoners. Talmud Omar Ki Anshe Mofet Hema. Pasuk says they were men of signs. And then Mofet Ela Navi, a sign meaning like a miracle. What's Mofet? That's referring to a prophet. Shneimar V'natan Alecha Ot O Mofet. It says in Devarim. How do you know if someone's a true prophet? Because he's going to give you a sign or a wonder. So therefore, the people that Yehoshua HaKohen Gadol was sitting with were Nevi'im, and yet it says, Yehoshua HaKohen Gadol, he's the main thing, you and the colleagues. The colleagues are lesser than him, therefore Kohen Gadol takes precedence over a Navi. Mashuach b'shem mishcha kodem lemerubeh begadim. A Kohen Gadol who's anointed with oil takes precedence over one who didn't get anointed with oil but became Kohen Gadol just by wearing the 8 garments. Merubeh begadim kodem lemashiach shavar mechamat keryo. A Kohen Gadol who wasn't anointed but has got the 8 begadim, he and is serving currently takes precedence over a Kohen Gadol who had to step down because he became tameh, because he was a Baal Keri. Mashiach she'avar mechamat keryo, kodem la'avar mechamat mumo. A Kohen Gadol who had to step down because he's tameh from Baal Keri takes precedence over someone who had to step down from being Kohen Gadol because he got a permanent blemish. That's worse. Avar mechamat mumo, kodem le'mishuach milchama. A Kohen Gadol who used to be Kohen Gadol, but now he was stepped down because he has a blemish, takes precedence over a Kohen who was anointed to go out to war, because the one that goes out to war is not as great as a Kohen Gadol in general. Meshur milchama kodem lasegan, and the Kohen Gadol who goes out to war, the Kohen who goes out to war and is anointed as such, is more important than the deputy. That's the Kohen Gadol. That's like a vice president in case the president dies or is incapacitated. The vice president comes in. So this is the Kohen, the ready and waiting, the person who, if the Kohen Gadol, something should happen to him, he will be ready to come and step and become Kohen Gadol. But at that point, he never has been Kohen Gadol yet. Segan kodem Amarkal, a deputy Kohen Gadol, takes precedence over the overseer, one of the officials in the Bet HaMikdash. My Amarkal, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Kula. Why is he called Amarkal? In fact, it's actually a Persian word from Har Markar, and it means someone who calculates. So you can even see the word calculate, Kal. So it's the calculator, some kind of financial officer. That's so it really comes from Persian. But Rav Chisda gives another etymology that Amar Kal is from Aramaic. Amar Kula, he says everything. His word, he decides everything. Amar Kal kodem legizbar. Now this official Amar Kal takes precedence over the treasurer over the Bet HaMikdash. Gizbar kodem lerosh mishmar. The treasurer takes precedence over the head of mishmar, a watch. There's the priestly watches, and there's one person, there's 24 of them, and so there's one person that's in charge of that group of Kohanim that will serve 1 week out of 24. Rosh Mishmar kodem lerosh bet av. Within a Mishmar, there's heads of households. So the head of the whole Mishmar is going to be more important than the head of the household. Rosh Betav Kodem leKohen Ediot, and the head of a household is going to take precedence over an ordinary Kohen. We were talking so far about if you can save only one person, who's more important. But what about regarding becoming Tameh? Does the deputy Kohen Gadol, if there's, let's say, a Met Mitzvah and someone has to bury him, even a Kohen Gadol can become Tameh for a Met Mitzvah. But let's say it's not Kohen Gadol, it's a Sagan, and the Kohen who is anointed for war. Which one of the two should become Tameh? Amar Mor Zutra Bered Rav Nachman, Tashma de Tanya, Sagan Moshe Milchama, שהיו מהלכים בדרך ופגע בהן מת מצווה, מוטב שיטמא משור מלחמה ואל יטמא סגן, שאם יארע בו פסול בכהן גדול, נכנס הסגן ומשמש תחתיו. Mozutra, the son of Rav Nachman, says, we can learn it from a Braita that says, if the Sagan and the Kohen anointed to go to war are walking on the way, and all of a sudden they came to a dead body that needs burial. Better that the Kohen who's anointed to go to war should become Tameh, not the Sagan, because the Sagan has to be ready to take over at any point. If there's a problem with the Kohen Gadol, he has to be Tahor so he can go and serve. And so that's an immediate need, whereas the Mashuach Milchama being Tahor is not as important. Hold on, but we learned above that the one who's anointed for war takes precedence over a Sagan. Ravina explains that was in order to, if you can only save one person, the life of Meshul Milchama is more important than the life of the Sagan, but the Tahor status of the Sagan is more important than the other. Kohen kodem leLevi, Levi l'Yisrael, Yisrael mamzer. Next Mishnah, very famous, says a Kohen comes before a Levi. Again, if you can only save one person or only have enough food in the middle of the desert, and one person will live and one will die. So you give the Kohen first. He has more responsibility, more holiness before Levi. A Levi more important than Yisrael. Yisrael more important than a Mamzer. Mamzer and Natin. Mamzer takes precedence over Natin, is a descendant of the Givonim who came to and joined Bnei Yisrael under false pretenses. But Natin leger. Natin comes before a convert. Veger le'ebed meshuchrar. Ger comes before an Eved Kanaani who becomes freed. turns into a Jew. So it's kind of like a conversion process, but they were a slave first. When do we follow this order? Only if they're all equal in their knowledge. But if the mamzer was learned and the Kohen Gadol is not learned, then the mamzer Tamid Chacham takes precedence over the Kohen Gadol Ha'Ma'aretz. So this is a fascinating Mishnah because the first half gives the traditional precedence of who's more important than the other. But then the second half of the Mishnah completely reverses it and says, yeah, if all being equal, you'd follow the Kohen, Levi, Israel, so on and so on. But actually, there's another value that's more important than any of these lineage values, and that is knowledge of Torah. And so this really now takes precedence over all of the lineages. Is you have to see how much Torah they know. So if two people drowning, you got to give them a test, right? See how many simanim in Shulchan Aruch, how many perakim, how much do they know, how much of Shas did they finish, and then you decide which one to save. Kohen kodem leLevi shneimar bnei Amram Aharon uMoshe vayibadel Aharon lakadisho kodesh kadashim. How do you know the Kohen comes before Levi? Because it says that Amram had two sons, Aharon and Moshe, and Aharon was separated to be Kodesh Kodashim. So you see, Aharon, who's a Kohen, is holier, whereas Moshe, who is a Levi, is not as holy in terms of the level of Kedusha. Levi kodem liYisrael shenemar ba'et hahi hibdil Hashem et shevet haLevi, and Levi takes precedence over an Israelite because it says in Devarim at that time Hashem separated the tribe of Levi to minister to Hashem and to bless in His name, and so they're more important. Yisrael kodem lamamzeh shezeh miyuchas v'zeh eno miyuchas. An Israelite is more important than a mamzer because an Israelite has good lineage. A mamzer has problematic lineage. His parents or somewhere before committed incest, adultery, and he's a result of that. Mamzer kodem lenatin zeh ba mitipa keshera v'zeh ba mitipa pesula. But a mamzer is better than a natin because a mamzer comes from Jewish seed, although it's from some kind of problematic relationship, but still his parents are Jewish, whereas in Natin, they came from the Givonim, who were not part of Bnei Israel. Natin kodem leger, ze gadal imanu biktusha, veze lo gadal imanu biktusha. A Natin is better than a convert because at least a Natin, these are the Givonim who converted a long time ago, so they grew up in sanctity among the Jewish people, whereas a convert grew up not Jewish and only joined in later on. Ger kodem le'eved meshuchrar, ze haya bichlal arur, v'ze lo haya bichlal arur, and a convert takes precedence over a freed slave because the freed slave, he was a slave, and as a slave, he was under the curse of Canaan. So he was under a curse, whereas the convert, when he was not Jewish, he was not under a curse, he just wasn't Jewish. And so that's better than the person who had been under a curse. The Mishnah continues and says that's only if they're equal in their Torah knowledge. What's the source? Because the pasuk in Mishleh says that, so about wisdom, same as Torah. Torah is more precious than rubies. But we're taking rubies here, mipininim, to be a reference to the lifnai v'lifnim, the inside of the inside, the holy of holies. So that's referring to the Kohen Gadol. He's the only one that can go into Kodesh Kodashim. So someone who has Torah knowledge, is more valuable than even the Kohen Gadol who goes into the Kodesh Kodashim. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Omer, Bedinu sheyakdim aibed meshuchrar leger, sheze gadal imanu biktusha, veze lo gadal imanu biktusha, ela ze ba bichlal arur, veze lo haya bichlal arur. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai teaches that really an Eved Meshuchrar should come before a convert because the person who was born as a slave, as a Canaanite slave, he was born into a Jewish home. So even though he was a slave, but he's in a Jewish home, so he's following all the laws, Shabbat and Kashrut, all mitzvot that a woman is chayavin, and Eved Kanani is also chayavin. And so therefore he grows up bikdusha, whereas the convert, before he converts, converted, he was not did not grow up in a family within holiness. So that really should be the truth, but the fact that the Eved is called cursed, that makes him worse. And that's why, in fact, the Ged is saved before an Eved Meshuchrar. Shalu Talmidav et Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Sadok. The students of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Sadok, asked him, why does everybody go run after a convert? Everybody wants to marry a convert, a female convert, but nobody wants to marry a female slave who was freed, a Canaanite slave who was freed. Why? What's the difference? Amar lahem, zo hayta bichlal arur, v'zo lo hayta bichlal arur. And he gave this reason because the Shifcha Kanaanit, she had been under a curse. It's a low level to be a slave, even though now she's freed, but because she had been called cursed, so no, she has a stigma. Nobody wants to marry that person. But a convert, that people are willing to marry. Or because a woman who converts, she probably kept her chastity. She had in mind that she's going to convert, and then she's gonna want to make sure that she doesn't act in a promiscuous way, because she's in charge of herself, and she knows that this is a path of life that she wants to lead. Whereas a Shifcha Kanaanit, she doesn't think that she's ever going to be freed. It's not up to her to be freed, but just, if she's lucky, her master will free her. But because she never expected to be freed, she may not keep herself in chastity. So nobody wants to marry her. Sha'alu Talmidav et Rabbi Elazar, mipnei ma keleb makir et kono vechatul eno makir et kono. A good question the students asked Rabbi Elazar, how come dogs know their owner, but cats don't recognize their owner? It's true, dogs know their owner much better than cats. Amar lehem, huma ochel mima she'achbar ochel meshakeach, hako ha'ochel achbar atzmo alachat kama v'chama. And he answered, well, there is a superstition that if you eat from food that a mouse ate, if the mouse nibbled from some cheese and you eat the cheese, then it causes forgetfulness. So if someone who eats from food that the mouse ate forgets, then the cat that eats the mouse itself, that must be really bad for memory. So that's why the cat doesn't remember its owner, because it keeps eating mice, and mice are bad for memory. So every day it forgets who its owner is. Shalu Talmidav et Rabbi Eliezer, mipnei ma kol moshelim be'achbarim. The students of Rabbi Eliezer then asked him, how come everybody hates mice? They always dominate, they try to catch them. What's so bad about mice? Mipnei shesuran ra, because they are really evil. Maihi, what do you mean? How are they more evil than anybody else? Their ways are evil. Rava Amar, afilu gilime gaiseh, that they go and they gnaw even at clothing. They don't get any nourishment from it. They just ruin clothing. It's one thing that they go and eat your food. All right, but they're hungry. But here, so they're just evil. It's not for their own benefit. They just go and destroy clothing. Rav Papa Amar, afilu shufta mara gaiseh. Rav Papa says they even gnaw on the handle of a hoe. It seems that mice, their teeth are always growing, and so they have to nibble on things to keep their teeth in check. So they do this for their own hygiene, but they're ruining things, even though they're not getting any nourishment out of it. So therefore, everybody hates mice. Now that we mentioned that eating a mouse's cheese is bad for memory, here are more things that are not good for memory. The following 5 things will cause one to forget his learning. Eating from something that was nibbled on by a mouse or a cat. Eating the heart of an animal, even a kosher animal. Eating too many olives. Drinking water that someone used for washing. Or washing one's feet one upon the other. Even though Kohanim used to do it in that way, but that's for a mitzvah. Some say also using one's clothing as a pillow, putting it under one's head. There are 5 things that return one's learning if you forgot it. Pat pechamin, v'chol sheken pechamin atzmam. Bread baked on coals, and using the coals themselves, not to eat them, but warm oneself in front of coals. Eating a hard-boiled egg without salt. Eating Olives are bad, but olive oil is good. V'haragil beyayin ubesamim, someone who regularly has wine and has spices. V'hashoteh mayim shel shiurei isa, and drinking water that's left over from kneading the dough. V'yesh omrim af hatobel esba'o b'melach ve'ochel, and some say also dipping a finger in salt and eating it. Haragil b'shemen zayit. Now we go back to the Braita and expand. Having olive oil is good. Meseh le Rabbi Yochanan, damar Rabbi Yochanan kashem shazayit meshakech. Meshakech Talmud shel 70 shana, kach shemen zayit meshib Talmud shel 70 shana. This supports what Rabbi Yochanan said, that just like eating olives causes one to forget one's learning, or we're learning that of 70 years. You could have learned something for 70 years, and then you have too many olives, you'll forget it. But so too, olive oil can restore learning from 70 years. Even if you forgot it for a long time, olive oil will remind one of the learning one did over 70 years. Someone who has wine and smells spices, that's good. And this supports Rava, who said, someone who regularly has wine and spices, who says wine and spices made me wise. A little bit of wine can open up one's imaginative faculties and help one think. Not too much, then you won't think about much at all. And when it says, if you dip your finger in salt and eat it, Resh Lakish says one finger, not all your fingers, not a scoopful of salt, but just one finger. כתנאה, רבי יהודה אומר אחת ולא שתיים, רבי יוסי אומר שתיים ולא שלוש, וסימנך כמיסה. This is actually subject to a machlok between two Tanaim. Rabbi Yehuda says one finger, but not two. Rabbi Yosef says put two fingers in the salt and lick the salt off, but not three. How can you remember that the machlok is between one finger and two fingers? You remember the word kimisa. Kimisa is referring to the ring finger. So if one holds down the ring finger, what you have is the pinky is one finger, and on the other side are two fingers. So then you'll know, the machlok is between either it's one or it's two, but you know it's not three. There are 10 things that are bad for Torah study. Going under, walking under the bit of a camel, and certainly under the camel itself. It's kind of dangerous, so don't go there. Going between two camels. Walking between two women, or a woman walking between two men. Maybe that's just because it's a distraction, so it's not good for learning Torah. Or going under a bad smell from a rotting animal carcass. Or going under a bridge where water has not passed for 40 days. Who knows what kind of mold or stuff is growing there. Or eating bread that was not baked sufficiently. Or eating meat with this type of spork that would be used for skimming off the surface of soup, and this has bad stuff on it. Don't use that. Drinking from an aqueduct that passes through a cemetery. Looking at a dead face of a dead body. And some say also reading the writing on a stone of a grave, maybe these things will bring one to depression, and so that is also not good for one's learning. תנו רבנן, כשהנשיא נכנס, כל העם עומדים ואין יושבים עד שאומר להם שבו. And now we're going to be talking about the respect one has to give to various sages. When the Nasi, he's the head of the Sanhedrin, enters into a room, everybody there stands up, the whole room, and they don't seat themselves until the Nasi reaches his seat and he tells everybody to sit. So that's the highest honor. כשהאב בית דין נכנס, עושים לו שורה אחת מכאן ושורה אחת מכאן, עד שישב במקומו. When the second person in charge, below the Nasi, is the head of the court, the father of the court, when he enters, so then only one row of people on each side, so he's walking, let's say, down an aisle, so the people that are right on the aisle will stand up, but everybody else in the room can remain seated. We're talking about that everybody will be sitting on the floor. So they remain, and they wait, and they stand until the Ab Bet Din reaches his spot, his chair, and then after he reaches their chair, they all sit down. They don't have to wait till he tells them to sit, like the Nasi. כשחכם נכנס, אחד עומד ואחד יושב עד שישב במקומו. When a chacham, who is lesser than the Nasi and Av Beit Din, when he walks in, so the people right next to where he's walking will stand up, and then when he moves away, then they sit down. So like they do a wave, they stand up wherever he is, and then just for a short time, and then they sit until he reaches his place. בני חכמים ותלמידי חכמים, בזמן שרבים צריכים להם מפסעים על ראשי העם, יעשה לצורך ייכנס וישב במקומו. The sons of the sages and the students of the sages, if the public needs them, then they can step on the heads of the other people. In other words, these students and sons, they're sitting on the floor in the middle of the audience. If they're needed in the front because they have to perform something, do something, then they're allowed to go and step over all the other people that are sitting in front of them in order to get to the front of the room. Generally, it's not nice to step over people, but they need to. And if the chachamim, the members of a Sanhedrin, they're all the way in the front of the room. Let's say they need to go to the bathroom. So now they have to step on everybody to try to get out. So they can do that. When you got to go, you got to go. But how about coming back? Yeah, they can do that also. Then they can come back and sit back in their place, even though that will be an imposition on all the people that they're going to have to move out of the way or stand up again or they're going to have to step over them. That's okay. בני תלמידי חכמים שממונים אביהם פרנס על הציבור, בזמן שיש להם דעת לשמוע, נכנסים ויושבים לפני אביהם ואחריהם כלפי העם. בזמן שאין להם דעת לשמוע, נכנסים ויושבים לפני אביהם ופניהם כלפי העם. The sons of sages whose fathers were appointed as leaders over the congregation. So these are important people, and now you have their sons, and the sons want to sit next to their fathers. The family could be together. So which way should the son face? The father is facing the people in front of the room, like on a dais. So how about the son? So it depends. If the son has knowledge and can understand when the teacher is speaking, then they sit in front of their fathers with their back towards the people. In other words, they're like a student, but they get the front row, so they could be right in front of their father, and but they're a student because they have understanding. So they'll be facing forwards. However, if it's a young student or a son or someone who he doesn't understand the lecture, then he also can come in and sit in front of his father, but he will be facing the audience to show he's there only as a member of the family of the father, who's the chacham or the teacher or the parnas. He's there just as a family member, not as a student. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Sadok Omer Af bebet hamishte osim otam senifim. Rabbi Sadok says also when they're seated at a wedding party, then the sons are an attachment to the father. The father is a great sage. He's going to get a special place and right in the front, in the middle of in the wedding. And the sons, even though they're not so great, but they get to sit next to their father. Amar Mor yasa lesorech nichnas v'yoshev bimkomo. Now we mentioned that if one of the sages had to go to the bathroom, he's allowed to come back in. Amar Papa lo amru ela liktanim, aval ligdolim lo. The Papa says that's only if he went to number one to urinate, because you never know, you might have to. But for number two, no. Then if he goes out, he can't come back in. Why? He should have checked himself before the lecture starts. Go to the bathroom, see if you need to go. So number one, it's harder to predict. You might have to go. But number two, you can go beforehand and not have to bother everybody. So therefore, if you go out for number two, then you can't come back in. Rav said that a person should always train himself to relieve himself, number two, in the morning and in the evening, so that you won't have to go far. During the day, you don't have like regular bathrooms like we have today. You have to find, during the day, to find a private place, you're going to have to go all the way outside the city. By the time you go out, come back. So therefore, go early in the morning when it's still dark out. You go late when it gets dark. Then it's easier, so you don't have to bother during the day. Rava says nowadays people are weak and they can't control their their bowel movement so well. So therefore, nowadays, even for number 2, if he leaves, he's allowed to come back. Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Sadok Omer. So now back quoting the source we just said, Rabbi Elazar says also at a wedding they can sit next to their father as an attachment. Rava says that's only when their father is alive and in the presence of their father. The father's at the wedding, but if the father's not at the wedding or he's deceased, then we don't give special honor to the sons. They're only there to sit next to the father, but they don't deserve that place in their own right. Following up on the laws of standing up for various officials, we have a fantastic story. Amar Rabbi Yochanan bimed Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel nishnet Mishnah zo. Rabbi Yochanan says that this baraita that teaches that for the Nasi, when he walks in, everybody stands up and remains standing until he gets to his seat and tells everybody to sit down. Whereas the Av Bet Din, only the front row, only one row stands up, the 2 rows next to him. And for the Chacham, they stand up and sit down as soon as he passes by. This baraita was taught during the days of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, in fact, by Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who was the Nasi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Nasi. Rabbi Meir Chacham, Rabbi Natan, Av Bet Din. At that time, Rashbag was the Nasi, Rabbi Meir was the Chacham, and Rabbi Natan was the head of the court. Second best, and Rabbi Meir third. Ki havad Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel hatam havu kaimeh kule alma mikameh. When Rashbag would walk into the room, everybody would stand up for him, as is appropriate. That's what they did. Ki havu ale Rabbi Meir Rabbi Natan havu kaimeh kule alma mikamaihu. And when Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan walked in the room, also everybody would stand up. So everybody stood up for all 3 sages. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, La ba'u lemeheveh kera ben dili lididhu taken ha-matnita. But Rashbag thought to himself, shouldn't there be a distinction between me and them? I'm the Nasi, so I should get more respect than they are. Therefore, he taught this baraita, and he said, for a Nasi, everybody stands up. But for the others, only the front rows stand up, and only for a Nasi, everybody stays standing until he tells them to sit. For the others, they don't do that, so that there would be a distinction between the honor of the Nasi and the others. Conveniently, the day that Rashbag taught this baraita, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan were not there, so he was able to teach it and nobody objected. The next day, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan walked in, and they see that the people were not standing up. They were not standing up as they usually do. They stood up a little bit, but the whole room didn't stand up as usual. So they wondered, what's going on here? And people told him, yesterday when you were in here, Rashbag taught this law, that everybody stands up for the Nasi only, but for the Bet Din, only the front row, and for the others, they just stand up and sit down right away as he passes by. Amar le Rabbi Meir Rabbi Natan, ana chacham ba'at Bet Din, natkin milata ki ledidan. So Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan were not happy with this. Rabbi Meir told Rabbi Natan, am chacham, you're Bet Din, we should make an enactment for ourselves. What should we do? Nemale gale okasim deletle v'chavan dela gamar nemale mi yemalel geburot Adonai yashmiya kol tehilato lemina el lemalel geburot Hashem mi sheyachol lashmiya kol tehilotav na'abre v'haveh ana abetin ve'at nasi. So what should we do to him? Let us surprise him tomorrow, and we will say to him, please reveal to us Masechet Okasim. Masechet Okasim, the last Masechet in Taharot, is very obscure, very difficult. It's about the stems of various fruits and vegetables. If someone tameh touches the stem, does it make the rest of the fruit tameh, and vice versa? And there's a lot of details, and people did not, even great rabbis, not everybody studied Okasim and knew it so well. So we know that Rashbag does not know Masechet Okasim because he hasn't learned it, or he hasn't learned it recently. Let us go and say, hey, reveal to us Okasim. He's going to get up and he's going to be stumped and embarrassed in front of everybody, and we will say, who is worthy of expressing the mighty acts of God? someone who can have all the praises heard. In other words, the praises of the Torah. Someone who can teach the whole Torah is worthy of being the Nasi. But if you don't know Kol Tehilotav, if you don't know all of God's praises, even one Masechet, you don't know Okasim, then you don't deserve to be Nasi. To who? Who is it? Who is worthwhile to be able to speak the strength of God? Only someone who can speak out all of his praises. And then, since he's embarrassed, we will remove him. We can fire him from his job. And then Bimir says, I will be Av Beit Din, and you can be the Nasi. So start giving him an opportunity. Everybody's going to get a promotion up. And then that will take care of that. Shema'in hu Rabbi Yaakov ben Karsheh. As they were making this plan to be Meir and Natan, Rabbi Yaakov ben Karshi overheard them. Amar Dilma chas v'shalom atiyah milata lidei kisufa. Rabbi Yaakov is not taking sides necessarily. He's just saying, chas v'shalom, I don't want there to be a public humiliation. Imagine in front of everybody, you say, give a class on this. And he says, blah, 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 I don't know anything. This would be terrible embarrassment. Azal yatib achore ilite de Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Pashat garas utna garas utena. So what did Rabbi Yaakov ben Karshi do? He didn't want to go directly and say, hey, I overheard those rabbis, they were saying. He didn't want to cause trouble like that. He didn't want to embarrass them either. So here's what he did. He went and sat behind Rashbag and behind the upper story where Rashbag lived. So he went to the nearby, next door, and he started talking about Masechet Okasim. And he read it out loud, and he explained it, and then he read it again and repeated it. All night long, he's saying and expressing Masechet Okasim loud, and happens to be right in the backyard of Rashbag. Amar, Maite Kamar. Rashbag heard this, and he said, what's going on? Something fishy here. Maybe there's something going on in the Bet Midrash. Maybe there's some kind of plan that people are hatching, and he got the hint. In other words, he says, someone is saying Masechet Okasim because someone's giving me a hint that I better study it. Yahab da'ateh u'grasa. So Rashbag paid attention to Rabbi Yaakov as he was repeating and explaining Masechet Okasim, and he learned it. The next day, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Natan said, let the Nasi teach Okasim. Patach ve'amad. And in fact, he revealed it and spoke about it, no problem. He gave a beautiful shiur. After he finished, he went to them and said, if I had not studied, if I had not been tipped off, you would have publicly humiliated me. So therefore, they have to do something about this. Pakid v'apekinu mibed midrasha. The Nasi, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, commanded that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan be kicked out of the Bet Midrash. Havu katvei kushiyata befitka ushtuata. Now, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan, they still want to learn Torah, they still want to be involved. So they would write down questions and throw it into the Bet Midrash, because when they were there, they would present questions to all the Talmidei Chachamim there. So, but they weren't allowed in, so they'd throw it in by paper. Dehava mifrik pirkik, dehava mifrik, delah havu mifrik katbe peruke v'shadu. Some of the questions the students were able to figure out and answer. Those that didn't, they were stumped. Then Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan would write down the answers and send it in. So you get a sense of how the educational model, that the teacher would present questions and the students would have to work on it. And if they would solve the problem, good. If not, then the teacher would have to say it. Usually it would all be oral, but here they're writing it down. It's really interesting because it means that usually they studied just orally. Here they were able to do it by writing because they couldn't present orally. Same thing with letters. Usually they learned everything orally, but if someone's far away, so they write a letter. But it's a temporary thing. It's not that it's an official writing. It's just because you have to get the message in. So they're writing down the questions, they're writing down the answers. Amar lehu Rabbi Yoseh, Torah b'chutz v'anu b'fnim. Rabbi Yoseh said, this is ridiculous. The Torah's outside and we're inside. What's the point of having a Bet Midrash if the greatest scholars are outside and they have to communicate only by letters? Amar lehen Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, ne'ailinhu, mihu niknesinhu, dela nemru shemata, mishemahir. Rashbag says, okay, fine. Let them come back into the Bet Midrash. However, they still have to get a punishment, and we're going to penalize them in that we're not going to quote Torah in their name. Asikul Rabbi Meir acherim, Rabbi Natan yeshomrim. And so, from then on, they said, whenever you quote Rabbi Meir, he's called acherim. And Rabbi Natan, he's called yeshomrim. According to this, whenever you see acherim or yesh omrim in Mishnah or Baraita, it could be referring to the Meir and Binatan. It doesn't necessarily mean it's always, because there are a lot of times when we see Acherim and it's not a Meir and so forth, but it means at least sometimes it could be them. Achvu lahu bechalmaihu zilu payasu l'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Meir and Binatan were given a message in a dream that they should go and apologize to Rashbag. Rabbi Natan azal, Rabbi Meir lo azal. Rabbi Natan listened to the message and went to apologize. Rabbi Meir did not go and apologize. He didn't think he had to. Amar divrei chalamot lo ma'alin v'lo moridin. Well, what about the dream? He said, dreams are not significant. They don't raise up, they don't lower down. A dream is just, your own subconscious, guilty conscious saying you should go and apologize. But when he was awake, he said, no, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't have to apologize. Whereas Rabbi Natan felt like the dream is a prophetic message. Ki azal Rabbi Natan amar le'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, nida hanilach kamra de'avuch lemheve abetin shevenech nameh nasi. When Rabbi Natan went to apologize, Rashbag really gave it to him. He said, even though the ornate belt of your father was effective in allowing you to be the Av Betin, but not enough to make you Nasi. His father was the exilarch, was the Resh Galuta. So Rabbi Rashbag is saying, listen, you only got your position, not because you deserve it, not because you're so worthy and learned, but this was nepotism because of your father. But the nepotism only goes so far as to make you Av Betin. You don't deserve to be Nasi. So how dare you do a plot against me and try to be the Nasi? We now get a follow-up to the previous story that some years later, Rashbag's son is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was teaching his son, Rabban Shimon, and he was teaching him a Mishnah in Masechet Bechorot that has to do with the laws of Maaser Behema. The laws of Maaser Behema is that you take the animals and you pass them through a skinny gate, and they go one by one, and you count 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the 10th one, you mark that's the 10th one. Now, if the the shepherd makes a mistake, and he counts 8, and the next one, he skips 9, and he goes straight to 10. So now, the 9th one, he counted as 10. And then he realizes he skipped 9, so the one after that, that's really supposed to be 10, he counts as 9. And then the one after that, since he just counted 9, he goes to 10. So the 11th one is called 10. What do you do? Which one is considered Maaser and which one not? There's a whole machloket about this, and in that Mishnah, it quotes Acherim Omrim. Others say, if it was considered a substitute, then you cannot bring it as a korban. So while they're learning, Amar lo, mihem alalu shemehem anu shotim, ushmotam en anu mazkirim. The son, Rabban Shimon, asks his father, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who is Acherim? Who are these sages that we drink of their waters, and yet we do not pronounce their names? Why don't we say their names? Amar le, Bnei Adam shebikeshu la'akor kibodcha uchvod bet avicha. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, these were people that wanted to uproot your honor and the honor of your father's house, because this is Rabban Shimon's grandfather, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And so they wanted to do a terrible thing. And he told them the story of what happened. Amar le gam ahabatam, gam sinatam, gam kinatam kebat abada. The son, Rabban Shimon, quotes a pasuk in Kohelet that says, their love and their hate, their envy, is long ago perished. In other words, it sounds like this was a terrible story. They shouldn't have done that. They were about to publicly embarrass the Nasi, but it happened a long time ago. This generation is gone. And so the love, the hate, it's all finished. So now, next time to move on. And now let's quote it by their name. So the son says, Amar le ha'oyeb tamu chorabot lanesach. But Rabbi Yehuda Nasi quotes a different pasuk in Tehillim and says, even though the enemy is gone, the destruction stays forever. Right? This threat, no, we can't ever forget it, and their names should be erased and continue to be erased forever. Amar le hanemi lehecha de'anhu ma'asaihu Rabbanan la'anhu ma'asaihu. And the son says, no, you would only say that if their matters were effective, if their plot actually worked and they had publicly embarrassed, then you'd say, okay, you know what? They did this, forever their names would be erased. But in fact, although they tried to do it, there's a difference between murder and attempted murder. Attempted murder is not so good, right? But if you tried but didn't work, so then You could be angry at that time. Afterwards, look, nothing actually happened. The plot did not work out anyway. So now it's time to move on. So this pasuk, that move on, is applicable in our case, and not your pasuk, which would only be if harm actually happened. Hadad atni le amru mishum Rabbi Meir. So afterwards, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi listened to his son and said, "Okay, fine, good point." And the next time that they learned it, he taught it in the name of Rabbi Meir. Ilu hayat timura lo hayat karev. Same law. If it was a substitute, you would not sacrifice it. Amar Rava afilu Rabbi da'an ve'tanahu tana amru mishum Rabbi Meir amar Rabbi Meir lo amar. And Rava points out that even Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was known for his humility, and so he's not doing it out of ego. Still, even he held back somewhat, and he said, they said in the name of Rabbi Meir, and he did not say, quote Rabbi Meir directly, and say, Rabbi Meir said. No, that he wouldn't say to give that much honor to Rabbi Meir. So even though he brought back, instead of Acharim, he quoted Rabbi Meir, but would only say it in a slightly roundabout fashion. They said in the name of Rabbi Meir. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.